start with a question to all of you. How many of you want to see a new government in Putrajaya? Raise your hands. Wow. Okay, so you are a converted audience, all right? But I'm sure there are some of you who's still wondering, who are still thinking, is a new government going to take place? Are we going to kick out Barisan Nasional in PRU 13? Can Pakatan Rakyat rule? Some of you are still thinking like that. Ladies and gentlemen, my message to those of you who are thinking like that is simply this: you have to stop thinking like that. The idea now of change, the idea that we must change Putrajaya, that we must kick out Barisan Nasional. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have no more option about that change. We have no more option. We have to do it. Why do I say that? Why do I tell you tonight that things have reached a point that we have no more option? I want to tell you a little bit in that connection about the judiciary, the Malaysian judiciary. The judiciary has been recently in the news for the wrong reasons. In the last few days, we had two things that happened that concerned the judiciary. One was that a humble imam from a mosque in Kampong Pandan threw his shoe at the federal court judges and now has been sent to jail for 1 year. That is one incident. The second incident is that the judge who heard the Altan 2-year trial, who finished the case over 2 years ago, finally did the job he was supposed to do. He wrote his grounds of judgment. We got to read it, 71 pages of his grounds of judgment. We got to read it a couple of days ago. First, about this imam from Kampong Pandan who got sent to jail for 1 year. Do you think he should have gone to jail for 1 year? No, of course not. There are people who are stealing not 1 million or 2 million of public money, stealing 10 million, who are taking 250 million of public money, buying expensive condominiums, and what happens to them? Do they go to jail? What happened to this imam from Kampong Pandan? He was being evicted from his house. He was being evicted. The other side, the authorities went to court to evict him to his house. This poor man could not afford a lawyer, so he didn't have a lawyer. So he didn't know the rules of procedure, and he filed his document late in court. Can you blame this guy? He didn't have a lawyer. He doesn't know the rules. But he was defending himself. But his document was filed late in court. So what did these three federal court judges do? What did they say to him? Oh, we cannot hear your case. We cannot hear your case. Why we cannot hear your case? Because you filed your document late. The poor imam stood there and said, I am not a lawyer. I don't have a lawyer. Please listen to my case. please listen to my defense, because the authorities are trying to kick me out of my house. What do the judges do? No, we can't listen to your case. So the poor man got emotional. Can you blame him for getting emotional? He got emotional. He took off his shoe and he threw it at the judge. I don't agree that he should throw his shoe. I'm not standing here to encourage people to throw shoes at judges. Please don't take that as encouragement. But the issue is, should he now be sent to jail for 1 year? That is the issue. You know, I want to tell you, there is a famous judge in the United Kingdom by the name of Lord Denning. How many of you have heard of Lord Denning? Some of you may have heard. Famous judge. He has written this book called The Due Process of Law. And the book has this wonderful little story. And with your permission, I want to read 2 paragraphs of that story, because it tells us something about the imam who is now going to go to jail for 1 year. And this is what Lord Denning wrote. He said this, and this is about the English Court of Appeal and how judges there behave and how they see the system of justice and their role as judges. He said this, on every Monday morning, we hear litigants in person, meaning people who don't have lawyers. We hear litigants in person. Miss Stone was often there. She made an application before us. We refused it. She was sitting in the front row with a bookcase within her reach. She picked up one of Butterworth's workman compensation cases and threw it at us. It passed between Lord Justice Diplock and me. Lord Justice Diplock is another one of those judges. It went wide. She picked up another and 2. She said, I am running out of ammunition. We took little notice. She had hoped we would commit her for contempt and draw more attention to her. As we took no notice, she went towards the door. She left saying, I congratulate your lordships on your coolness under fire. Now look at the difference. Look at the difference between these English judges, where the litigant is upset with them, picks up a book. This is a true story. This is not a made-up story. This is a true story. Throws the book at the judges. They just smile and say, and ignore it. What do our judges do? Our judges send a poor imam to jail for 1 year. But what has happened to the murderers of Altan Tuya? What has happened to the murderers of Teo Beng Hok? What has happened to the murderers of Ahmad Sarbani? What has happened to the murderers of Kugan? Have they got justice from the Malaysian courts? That is the question. Ladies and gentlemen, I start with this little story again to say why we have no option. We must change. We must change Putrajaya if we are going to save our beloved country. We have no option. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about this 71-page judgment which was just given by the judge who heard the Altan Tuya case. It should have been written 2 years ago. So question now is, why did it take you so long to write a judgment? I was reading it before coming here. For those of you who want to read it, my advice is don't bother. It's a complete waste of time to read the 71 pages. But lawyers like us have no choice. We've got to read it because President Dato Sri will ask, Siva, what is your opinion of that judgment? So I've got to read it and come. Now, this judge who heard the case, his name is Dato Zakir Yasir. He spends 71 pages trying to convince us that the two policemen, Sirul and Azila, are guilty of the murder of Altanduya. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to write 71 pages to convince anybody that these two guys killed her. The whole world knows that these two guys killed her. The whole country knows, the whole world knows that these two gentlemen took her from in front of Razak Baginda's house, took her to a place in Shah Alam, Bukit Charaka, shot her dead, possibly even sexually assaulted her, and then put C4 on her body and blew her up to bits. Everybody knows that. You don't have to write 71 pages of judgment to persuade us of that. I mean, you don't have to go to university. You don't have to have a law degree. Everybody knows that. The real issue is who asked them to kill her? Who gave the instruction to these two guys to kill her? That is the question. That is the real question. These two guys have no motive. Everybody knows that. You don't have to go to university to know that, do you? You don't have to spend 4 years studying law to understand that. These two guys have no motive. They killed her because they are trained killers. You ask me to kill, I kill. That's what they did. So the real murderer, in other words, these guys are just the gun. The real question is who pulled the trigger? But this judge didn't ask the question. Didn't ask the question. And this is the question that the police refused to ask, the AG's chambers refused to ask, and during the whole trial, everybody refused to ask. Everybody. So, in this judgment, the judge tries to persuade us that Razak Baginda is innocent. And that is why he said, I didn't call for his defense. He doesn't even have to take the stand to explain. And this is where the judge is, and I have to say this, the judge betrays, the judge violates the ethics of an independent judge. This is not an independent judge. Common sense. Common sense. And I say this, you don't have to go to university to understand this. Common sense says you must ask Razak Baginda to take the stand and explain what actually happened. Whether he is finally guilty is a separate question, but at the very least he must be asked to explain what took place. Why? Because there are so many questions that should have been asked but were never asked. And ladies and gentlemen, the reality is that many of those questions don't just concern Razak Baginda, who was acquitted by this judge, they also concern our Prime Minister and possibly his wife. What are those questions? Let me just share some of that with you. What are those questions? What is the connection between Altanduya and our Prime Minister? The question that could not be asked in court. The question that the police, the investigating police officers refused to ask. The question that the AG refused to ask, and the question the judge refused to allow to be asked in the trial? These are some of the questions. The first question is, of course, the relationship between Razak Baginda and Prime Minister himself. We know they are closely connected, but we also know that Razak Baginda approached a person called DSP Musa Safiri, apparently for help to get protection against Al-Tantuya, because Al-Tantuya was harassing him. The interesting question is, who is DSP Musa Safiri? Now, DSP Musa Safiri is the ADC to the Prime Minister. You know what ADC is? The Chief of Staff, the personal officer of the Prime Minister, no less. And this is the person who organized the police, who even introduced private investigator Bala Subramaniam to Razak Baginda. Now, on the night of the murder, 19th of October 2006, Razak Baginda called Musa Safiri for help, according to the story. Now, don't you think that at the very least, Musa Safiri should be called as a witness in the trial? Common sense. If you were investigating this case, surely Musa Safiri must be questioned and must put on the court to explain what was his link with Razak Baginda. Now, was that allowed to be happen? No. Musa Safiri is not even called as a witness. Okay, one more connection. That same night, these two policemen come with another lady friend, a lady cop. They arrive in front of the house. Private investigator Bala Subramaniam is there with Al-Tantuya and so on. There's a commotion going on. And they take Al-Tantuya, put her in a car, and they drive off. And that is the last, apparently, everyone sees of Al-Tantuya, because she is killed in the same night, inshallah. Now, this is information from P.I. Bala's statutory declaration, the first statutory declaration. He says, a few minutes after that, a Proton Saga drives past with the driver's window down. A Malay man is driving the car. Later, P.I. Bala identifies that Malay man as being Nasir Safa. Now, the name Nasir Safa not ring a bell. Nasir Safa became famous about 2 years ago when in Malacca he made a racially provocative speech running down Chinese and Indians. Nasir Safa was personal secretary to the Prime Minister for over 20 years. That is Nasir Safa. This man was identified by P.I. Balasubramaniam as being in front of Razak Baginda's house that same night of the murder. Don't you think that Nasir Safa has some explaining to do? And don't we think that the Prime Minister himself has some explaining to do? Why Musa Safiri is connected to this incident? Why Nasir Safa is connected to this incident? And of course, we've got other connections. P.I. Bala says in his second, in the later evidence, that he was made to meet the brother of the Prime Minister and forced to pull back his first statutory declaration. He says that all this was arranged by a businessman called Deepa, who is a very close friend of Rosma, the wife of the Prime Minister. All these connections are there in the mystery of the murder of Al-Tantuya. Ladies and gentlemen, let me summarize this. What does this tell us about our institutions, about the police, about the Aegis chambers, about the judiciary? What it shows us is basically that all these institutions were manipulated. were manipulated to make sure that the role of the people connected to the Prime Minister was completely buried from the trial in court. None of this was allowed to come out in court. So, for example, and this is one of the most farcical aspects of the trial. During the trial, some of you may remember when the Altan Tuya's friend was giving evidence and she started talking about the photograph. The photograph, she said, Altan Tuya showed me a photograph and told me about the photograph where she said, this man, and she was almost identifying the person as Najib Abdul Razak. And guess who stands up to object? The prosecution objects, the defense objects, the judge objects, everybody objects, so that the witness is not allowed to tell that story. This was how the Altan Tuya trial was conducted. And ladies and gentlemen, this is why I come back to my message earlier. If we have no option, when the next general election comes, and that can be any time, it can be May, it can be June, it can be September, all of us have to make sure that we bring change in Putrajaya. Now, looking at the reaction here, the response here, as I said earlier, I am quite sure that PJ Selatan will remain in the hands of Pakatan Rakyat. Can we make sure of that? But this is my reminder, this is my my message to all. It is not enough that PJ Selatan remains in the hands of Pakatan Rakyat. We have to win more seats. We have to win the seats that we have not won. For example, in Selangor, we must win, for example, Pandan. In the same way, we must win more seats in Selangor, Johor, Negeri Sembilan, Pahang, Perak, and so on. This is where all of us must play our role. Message that we get tonight, the message must be carried to your friends, your family, our supporters all over the country. It is only that way, ladies and gentlemen, by working together, carrying that message, that we must make sure we must win the additional seats to make sure that we change the government in Putrajaya and take Malaysia to a wonderful and great future. Can we do that together? Thank you. Thank you very much again for the invitation. Thank you. Keep up the good work, and God willing, we will make the change this PRU 13. Thank you very much. Good evening to all of you.